our little children, some of them just went out to Sparks a moment ago. Sparks is our Sunday school for little ones. And sometimes at Sparks, they sing a song called the Sorry Song. And it goes like this. I'm sorry, I wish I could start again. I'm sorry, I wish I could start again. Do you want to sing it with me? Should we do it again? Okay, 1, 2, 3, hit it. I'm sorry, I wish I could start again. I'm sorry, I wish I could start again. It's a lovely little song. Why don't you give yourselves a round of applause? That was a great rendition. I do like that song. It's very cute. But it also stops me in my tracks whenever I hear them singing it. Because it's a disturbing thing to hear a 2-year-old singing. Why would a 2-year-old or even a 5 or 6-year-old wish they could start again? Isn't that quite sad? They've done so little wrong. Yes, they may have spread their Weetabix all up the wall, or yes, they may refuse to go outside without wearing a Spider-Man costume, but really, does that mean they have to start again? I sat with this feeling of being a bit disturbed by this for a while, and eventually I remembered that actually, as followers of Jesus, when we talk about starting again, we don't simply mean wiping our moral scorecard clean, as if church were a laundrette where we sort out our dirty washing, only to bring back more the next week. That's not quite it. When we talk about starting again, as Christians, we mean completely starting again. We mean dying and starting again. Because Christians, whether 2 years old or 82 years old, are people who have died. Christians are people who have died. We are people who look back at the death of a real historical person, Jesus of Nazareth, and we say, yes, that was my death too. I died there too. We're also people who look back at the resurrection of a real historical person, this same Jesus, and we say, that's mine too. And that's why we talk or sing about a new start. All of life now is a new start. All of life now is resurrection life. So when we sing, I'm sorry, I wish I could start again, I'm sorry, I wish I could start again, we're actually recalling a new start that's already happened. We're throwing ourselves back. Oh, here comes one of them. You need to say sorry. Come on. We, along with the Sparks, are throwing ourselves back onto Jesus, onto this man, onto his death, and onto his resurrection. Followers of Jesus have always marked this new start in a very particular and slightly strange way. Baptism. To give you a sense of what that word means, it's a Greek word originally, and in ancient Greek literature, when a ship is destroyed at sea, it is baptized. Baptism means sinking. So when we baptize people, we plunge them into the water, or we pour water over them. And it's to symbolize their destruction, their death. And then we pull them back out again, and we dry them off to symbolize their resurrection, their new start. This is what happened to Olivia just now. This is what happened also to Otis earlier in Bubble Church, who was baptized. And this is what happened to Saul about 2,000 years ago. They were all baptized. They all died and rose again. We're in the middle of a sermon series on the book of Acts at the moment, and the passage that we just read is quite well known. You may have heard of it. It's even a story that seeped into the everyday English language. People sometimes talk about having a Damascene moment, meaning a sudden change of heart or mind, just like Saul did on the road to Damascus. People sometimes talk about the scales falling from my eyes, meaning that they suddenly realized something that was true that they hadn't seen before. So it's quite a well-known passage as far as Bible passages go. It's the account of Saul, the arch persecutor, as Joe was praying earlier, a keen Christian catcher who spent his days hunting down followers of Jesus Christ, or followers of the way, as Christianity was called at the time. But by the end of this episode, he's in a completely different place, isn't he? He has become a Christian. He has embarked on this way himself. And, although he has no clue about this yet, he would soon become the most influential Christian ever, under a new name, Paul. So this episode is usually called the conversion of Saul. But I think the change that he undergoes is actually more powerful than that. This is not just the tale of the conversion of Saul. This is the tale of the death and resurrection of Saul. This is the tale of the baptism of Saul. An extremely unlikely individual completely starting again, coming out the other end freshly minted with the stamp of Jesus, his death and his resurrection. First, death. Death happens to Saul. Saul is traveling on the road to Damascus and he sees flashes of light all of a sudden. He falls down and he hears Jesus speaking to him and has a brief conversation with Jesus. His companions with him don't see any lights, but they do hear the voice. They hear the conversation. And then as Saul gets up from the ground, they must have noticed that something wasn't right. Here's the bit that I want to focus on and I find really fascinating. It's in verse 8, if you want to look at it in your Bibles. It says, Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind and did not eat or drink anything. Who else spends 3 days in darkness and did not eat or drink anything? You can shout it out if you think you know the answer. Jesus. Jesus did. Saul's 3 days in darkness without food or drink mirrors Jesus' 3 days in the darkness of the tomb. It's as if Saul's encounter with Jesus on the road has left him dead and buried after the pattern of Jesus himself. So first, Saul, in a symbolic way, dies. Second, resurrection. In this short passage, the words get up occur a lot. You may have noticed. They occur 4 times altogether, culminating in verse 18, when the scales fall from Saul's eyes and it says, he got up and was baptized. So it says get up a lot in this passage. Who cares? Well, I do, because in Greek, there are 2 words meaning get up, and both appear here in this passage, and both have another meaning. They also mean rise from the dead. In Luke chapter 24, for example, both words also appear, and in verse 34 it says, the disciples who met the risen Jesus on the road to Emmaus, they run to tell the others, it is true, the Lord has gotten up. Then in verse 46, Jesus appears to his disciples and says, this is what is written, the Messiah will suffer and get up from the dead on the 3rd day. We normally translate that as resurrect or rise, but it's not. It's just get up, stand up. So the fact that we find Saul's story full of getting up, and the fact that it climaxes with Saul himself getting up on the 3rd day, I think is no coincidence. Acts is actually written by Luke, the same person who wrote the Gospel of Luke. And Luke loves to point out the shapes of Jesus' life that we saw in the Gospel of Luke emerging again in the lives of people in the early church, in Acts. So here, with the story of Saul, I think Luke is having a bit of fun. He's teasing out the hidden reality of what has happened to Saul. He's not only gone down to the tomb with Jesus for 3 days, he's risen with him as well. And then to mark this transformation, Saul is baptized in some water. In, out, dead, alive, done and dusted. And that's where we left Saul today. But I wonder what awaits him now. Equally, what awaits Olivia now that the same has happened to her? What is their new start going to look like? Well, at the point that we leave him in the story, Saul's only clue is the person standing right there in front of him, Ananias. Ananias is Saul's first close-up look at what a new start in Jesus looks like in practice. And I think it looks pretty good. Ananias, I think, shows at least two features of the life of the baptized, or the life of followers of Jesus: intimacy with God and solidarity with others. Ananias shows intimacy with God and solidarity with others. First, baptism is the new start that puts us on a course of intimacy with God, the creator of the universe. Ananias and the Lord have a relationship. It's the first thing that springs out from this passage. They speak to each other. They listen for each other. And in fact, it's an intimacy that verges on audacity. The Lord tells Ananias to go and see Saul, and instead of saying, "Yes, Master, you are God after all," Ananias says, "Lord, are you crazy? Do you know who this man is? Do you know what he's done? Do you know why he's come here? It's to persecute your people." And the Lord says, "Yes, I know. Now go and see Saul." Intimacy to an audacious degree. Ben is a part of our church here, and he gave me permission to share some of his story, which he's written down, of the aftermath of the birth of his son, the medically miraculous birth of his son a few years ago. And I'm going to just read you a short excerpt of what Ben wrote about this. To give you the context, Ben's son has just been born, and Ben finds a church and goes and sits down in the church, and he's alone. But suddenly, he hears a voice saying, "Hello," and congratulating him on the birth of his son. And this is what Ben writes. "Oh my God! I was having a stroke out of fear. God, who is this talking to me? How does he know that my son's been born? Wow, I'm going crazy." And then the voice said clearly, "Do not be afraid. Don't worry. And there's no need to be crazy. My name is Jesus." Ben says, "I laughed and opened my eyes because I felt that someone there was who knew me and was telling a joke or trying to annoy me. But no one was there. I quickly closed my eyes. I said, 'Are you here?' And the voice said, 'I'm always with you.'" There's more to that conversation, but I'll leave it there for today. I think it's an amazing real-life testimony of the surprising intimacy that life with Jesus brings. He's right there. He knows what you're going through. He wants to go through it with you. He wants to speak with you about it. I've personally never had anything like that. I've never had an audible conversation with Jesus like Saul and Ananias and Ben. But he is my Lord and my friend, and I talk with him in prayer, and I listen for his help and instruction, and I sense his guiding. Because this is the bread and the butter of those who are baptized into Jesus. Olivia and all of us who are living out the New Start life with Jesus, we can claim this same audacious intimacy with him. So there's the first bit. Baptism is a new start that puts us on a course of intimacy with God. But it's also, and equally, the new start that pushes us into solidarity with other people. These are some words from Rowan Williams, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury. He puts it like this: "In the Gospels, Jesus is found in the neighborhood of human confusion and suffering. defenselessly alongside those in need. So to be able to say, I'm baptized into Jesus, is not to claim an extra dignity, let alone a sort of privilege that keeps you separate from and superior to the rest of the human race. But it's to claim a new level of solidarity with other people. It is to accept that to be a Christian is to be affected, you might even say contaminated, by the mess of humanity. Ananias showcases this solidarity beautifully. Saul is Ananias' persecutor, his enemy. He has come to Damascus with the sole purpose of dealing ruthlessly with Ananias and his fellow Christians. And the first thing Ananias does to Saul when they meet is lay hands on his shoulders and call him brother. Jesus called this solidarity with others love of neighbor. He even called it love of enemy. And it's what Ananias showcases. I've been thinking about this idea of Christians being people who have solidarity with others. And I've been asking God for a kind of practical example of what that could look like. And I was a bit stuck. I'm sure there are loads, but I just nothing was coming. And then on Thursday, I took my son to the play park very early in the morning. And a little later, another dad joined with his son. And we got chatting. And he started sharing with me. In fact, he started oversharing with me, really, about how he had been a successful criminal barrister, but had let it all go to become a stay-at-home dad. And just for about 10 minutes, he basically spilled the beans with me about how hard it had been, how he'd had to totally adjust his sense of self, how people had treated him so much worse, how people suddenly found him less interesting, how he'd lost status, as he put it, in the eyes of the world. And I just nodded and I listened. And somehow we ended our chat with him talking about how God is love. And I was nodding and saying, oh yeah, that's straight from the Bible, actually. And then our boys pulled us in different directions, and eventually we went home. And before I left, I just said, nice to meet you. And that was it. Off we went. But later I thought back, and I realized how odd it had been. Either that dad shares his trauma with every stranger that he meets in the play park, or, for some reason, that morning, he chose me as a solidarity partner. Didn't know who I was, didn't know that I was a priest or a Christian or anything. I think it's the second one. I think for some reason, he just chose me. I'd asked God for an example of solidarity, and God gave me the opportunity to stand with this man, to empathize with his struggle, to listen to him, to be kind with him for 10 minutes, to stand for a few moments in solidarity with him. And I think this is the stuff of life for those baptized into Jesus, solidarity with others, whether they're your murderous enemy or whether they're a fellow dad in the playground. So for Saul and for Olivia, this is what baptized life, New Start life, can look like. Intimacy with God, solidarity with others. It's going to look like much more than that as well. God has so many exciting things in store for Olivia. But Ananias gives us a good first course, a good taste of what it's going to be. Intimacy with God and solidarity with others. Now, I'm going to draw to a close soon, but I want to end with some questions. First, a question for people who haven't been baptized or who have children who haven't been baptized. And my question is simple. Do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? If you're not sure, I want to just offer you a couple of things to help you reflect, and I hope push you towards maybe saying, yes, actually, I think I do. Or I do want my child to be baptized. I want to be baptized myself. So, number one, I just want to point out that baptism is primary. It's the first thing that followers of Jesus do. Today we saw that it's the first thing that happened to Saul as he's released from being entombed in blindness. Remember, he hasn't eaten for 3 days. And the order is, the scales fall from his eyes, he gets baptized, then he eats some food. Not food, then baptism. Baptism is the first thing for him. And I think the man that we met last week in Acts showcases this as well. Last week in Acts chapter 8, we saw that baptism was the first thing that the Ethiopian eunuch did once he's understood from Philip who Jesus was. He saw some water and he said to Philip, "Look, there's some water. I want to do it. Baptize me." Baptism is not an optional add-on. It's not a nice to have. It seems from these passages that baptism is primary. And number two, baptism is sometimes something that people choose, like the Ethiopian eunuch chose to do it. But sometimes it's something people have chosen for them, like in the case of Saul, like in the case of Olivia. The first people I baptized were two teenage boys who had made the decision for themselves. They wanted to start this journey. And it was fantastic. It was glorious. But equally glorious and equally glorifying to God is when people have baptism chosen for them. Saul didn't choose. He didn't know what had hit him. It was absolutely not his plan or desire to be baptized. The whole transformation and new start, the lights, the voice of Jesus, the blindness, was very much done to him by powers completely out of his control. Similarly, for Olivia, she had absolutely no plan or desire to be baptized today. The choice was made for her, discerned for her by her parents and by the wider church, the body of Christ. So there's just a couple of reflections. Baptism seems to be primary, and baptism is sometimes chosen and sometimes chosen for you. So if you haven't been baptized, or if you're a parent and you're not sure whether to have your baby or your child baptized, consider those things. And please come and talk with me or with Cara or with Marcus, our vicar. We want to listen to you. We want to think with you about it and find out whether it's the right thing for you. Or if you want to pray about it today, in a few moments we're going to have a chance for prayer to come up to the front and have people pray for you. Do come and take that opportunity if you want to pray about this question. Do you want to be baptized? Or do you want your child to be baptized? My other question is for people who have been baptized already. Do you want to renew and reaffirm your baptism today? Do you want to say yes again to the new start that you have in Jesus? Do you want to say yes again to a life of intimacy with God and solidarity with others? We've all reaffirmed the baptismal faith already today in the words that we all joined in with Olivia and her parents and godparents. But maybe you'd like to take a further step. In a moment, we're going to have a time of worship and prayer. And actually, could I invite the band up now, please, to lead us in that? Thank you. And during that time, if you've been baptized already, you are welcome to come up to the font. I'm going to move it just down there. The cameras are going to go off. You're welcome to come up to the font and anoint yourselves with the water of baptism. That could be just taking some and sprinkling it on your head. It could be, I'll just do it now, getting some water on your finger and making the sign of a cross, like that, on your head. And I'll stand there and I'll just say a really simple blessing for you as you do that. So if you would, in a very simple way, like to reaffirm your baptism today, you're so welcome just to do that over there. As I said, the cameras are going to go off, so no one's going to be watching it on the live stream, but you're so welcome to come and do that.